So we're here to solve this Slitherlink by Tom Collyer. It's describing uncommon patterns, and actually at the start of the grid, the only common pattern I see that gives me straight away some lines is the 0 next to a 3 and a forced corner. The other 0 just really has 2's around it. There's some amount of shape near this space that's somewhat interesting. It actually looks like one constraint, which may be related to the uncommon patterns here, is just looking at some of these options and thinking that if I took an edge like this, I'm forcing the 3 to come around it, but I'm now going to pin an end that can't work off this 1 and work off that 1. And so around this 3, I've got these 2 spots that are pretty limited. And it's not that I can do too much more of that right now, but it does look like connections with 1s are potentially a place that's going to be important. One thing you can recognize is if this doesn't turn, we're going to come through this column, and that will quickly fill a lot of the grid. So let's come up to the top. There's another space that's got a lot of 1s, like right around here. Like even the diagonal connectivity near that space could be somewhat interesting. One thing to think about, it looks like, is again sort of how do sort of parts of the loop flow around a 2. A 2 can sometimes be diagonally filled, so come up this edge and that edge, or come these edges, or it could be split like this. Notice that any one of these edges is now going to force, because it's next to a 1, the next edge to come out, up and out. And what that means is it will actually be canceling all the options on the other side. And so if this tried to come straight through, we leave behind a single edge. It can't come here, it can't come here, it can't go out. And so this 2 definitely does not use parallel lines. What I'm curious about is that there's definitely some constraint that's around this digit based on all the 1s. Can I do something like I did here and look at these exterior pieces of a clue, and does that pin something? So let's say I took this edge, and I think I can make this same logic work for any of these 4 edges. What I then do is limit this cell right opposite from being used, and I need to still make a valid 2 shape. Can I come through this point? Well, to come through this point as part of the 2, I'd have to come down here, but now I have no ability to take this edge because I'd go larger than 1, and no ability to take this edge. I take 2 total edges around this. And so if I take this edge here, I have basically made this shape invalid, that the 1s have to be using some of the edges that are interior to the 2, but not this edge, not this edge, not this edge, not this edge. And I think the same deduction works up here, actually. If I took this edge, I would again have a 2 shape where I can't come over here and I can't come over here, and so I really just have one border I can take. And so the pattern to see is around shared 1s near a very constrained space. Look at this. I can mark this as unused for the same reason these are unused, and that actually gives me this whole 3 shape. That's going to probably get me a lot of progress. Okay, so what to actually do with some of these constraints? Well, one of the things it looks like this unused space gave me is a little more information around the 3. There's another thing I could have done at the start, which was to say this edge is used. If this edge isn't used, the loop starts like this, but again pin a single edge that can't come to the left. I said it wasn't being used and can't come to the right because it would be part of the 1. So this edge is used. That means that the remaining parts of the 1 are either of these. We do have to still come in and out from the loop, and so there's going to be a constraint. It probably is coming up over here, which is if I take all these parts around the 3, I'm going to be stranding an edge near this too, that there's a diagonal connectivity issue that's going to come up from this side, based somewhat in terms of how I fill out the shape. The clearest way to see that is to think about which edge of the 3 isn't used. And I think particularly the deadly pattern is to use these 2 edges, and that forces this thing to be pinned in that. So here's another uncommon pattern, but very much set. One of these 2 edges is the unused edge of the 3, so we don't pin this part of the grid. And that means that these 2 are used. That means actually to finish the 2, I have to come down here. That means actually the 3 continues like so. This is the only way to finish the 2 once we've taken the edge around the 1. This 1 now just has one edge we can take. This now connects into a 3, so it's going to be a shape like this. Notice if this comes down, it's going to force closure of the loop, so this goes across. This can't come further. We've taken an edge away from this 1, and so that's probably going to lead to some of the same deductions we had around the grid. So in this case, this corner can't be bridged, so I can't come in here. So this is no good. So it actually does this pattern. This 2 is now finished, comes up and over. This 2 is, it can't come into this space, so it's got to take this edge. This 1 takes that edge. So we've got some good progress there. Back up to this 3, we can't come and take this edge because we'd strand an edge over on the side of the loop. We'd get a part of the 3 like this, but this edge would be singleton. So this comes down. That means the unused edge of the 3 is one of these, and it means that one of the connections out from the 3 is this 1. That now is going to quickly do this kind of cancellation as we talked about at the start. Make this pattern be necessary. This has to come down to do a legal pattern. This can't come further up here because it already has taken that 1, so it comes here. We really don't have a lot of maneuverability looking at this part of the grid. I actually see at this stage we're going to have a case where if I actually take this edge, I would make another pattern that itself would be deadly. It looks like actually at the start of this puzzle I missed something, but here's another case where it's coming to all these uncommon patterns and learning all that they can mean. In this case, if I had taken an edge like this, I would strand behind too little for the 2. Similarly, if I'd taken this edge, I would come around and strand too little behind the 2. So it looks like at the start of the puzzle, a different way you could break in here is to say that you can't take any of these 3 edges, you must take this edge. It seems limiting, but actually when we're now at this stage of the puzzle, it's going to tell us immediately something like that is done. This edge can't come up because it's got nowhere else to go, so it's going to be like this. Got this shape forming in the grid. This connection through the 2 is going to come out like this, and so there's going to be an edge coming out from the 2 in that direction that's useful. There's a little more we can probably say, like one but not both of these edges are used, so this part must be around the 2. That actually forces this. Guess we don't use this kind of logic a lot in Slitherlink, but let me show you something here. Here are 2 ends, and if this end continues up into the grid, and it would do that by coming this way, it's going to connect to this 3 directly. And this end can't get anywhere except through the 3. Like there's no way out of this part of the region if it came left or down and left. Those are the only 2 options. Both of those connect to the 3. And so right now these ends could connect with themselves like this, but notice what that's going to do is have this end and this end come together, and this is also set to close quickly. If 2 ends are over here, the 3 is forced to do this. And so the reason that matters is there's a little part of the loop that's locked here. If this closes off, then this also closes off, and that's no good. And so here it's not an uncommon pattern. This is more a global pattern that we see sometimes in these puzzles. I have to have this part of the grid open with an odd number of ends and this part of the grid open with an odd number of ends, because if both close, the loop closes prematurely. What it means is that I can draw this edge and not the other option. This end can't come up because the 2 would come together at this 3. So that forces these connections, that forces this. This loop end comes over, this loop comes there. We've now got this part of the grid somewhat set. We are, as we said before, going to have an edge that's like this or an edge that's like this that connects with the 3. Notice what that does is in either state of the world, this part of the 3 must be part of the loop, actually because of what we've already drawn up here. We know that the parts of the loop that must be true are these. That actually now shows me if I came this way, I'd block off the loop, and that would be no good. So I can force myself to draw that shape. This now limits around this 2, and so this 2 has to be a diagonal type pattern, so it's going to need to go this way or that way to get two edges. One end is going to escape out like I'm drawing. This diagonal connection means that the loop also has to come and connect out diagonally through this too. There are one or the other option here, but both cases use this end of the loop. Notice I've got 1, 2 ends down here. I don't want to take a third from this 3, so this is going to want to escape up on its own. That now forces this part of the 2, which now for this clue takes the top edge, for this clue takes the left edge. This is some pretty fast logic, but very much forced from standard Slitherlink. We'll need to think a little bit about this 2 must come straight across, can't come down, must come straight and connect. So that means this 3 now comes straight up. That actually limits a ton of these edges. The 1 has to be the top edge here. This is going to come across. The 2 is going to need to take this clue. This 1 now limits all options except coming straight across the top here. This is here. Last edge there. We finish this puzzle. It's a clever setting by Tom Collyer. As we actually discovered while going through the solve, the first thing I noticed were these exterior options near a clue like a 1, 3, 1, or then eventually these exterior clues, these edge options near this whole shape pattern. But actually turned out at the start there's a whole lot more constrained here in these diagonal options, that this whole set of 0, 2, 3, 1, with this 1 adjoining it, was limiting us to absolutely take this edge. And similarly, this pattern about the exterior parts of 1 and 2s came back to bear exactly here. And so there's some interesting logic in these spots that seeded enough of the grid to then do standard Slitherlink steps around. We did a little bit of connectivity here. I'm not sure we actually needed it. We may have been able to come across the top faster, but doing some connectivity got an odd end down here and an odd end here. They dodge each other, get up to this space, and then the rest of the loop resolved itself. So hope you learned a little bit about how to think through a tough Slitherlink puzzle. A lot of what you saw me trying to do is visualize a little in my head and also think about fairly constraining spots. And definitely diagonally adjacent ones are fairly constraining. That, you know, if you come along one edge, you've got to then jump up. Like if you do this, you've got to jump up or right, and you effectively immediately wipe it out in those other directions. And that very much plays around some of these settings where you have to put a whole lot of edges around a 3. Got to put enough edges around this 2 that it matters. So with that as the teachings for today, we'll see you again soon.